Hey, good morning, Bobcats. Welcome back to Startup Stories. Your Wednesday 9 a.m. morning stop. We come at you with fresh entrepreneurial insights, intakes. So tune in, show up every Wednesday 9 a.m. sharp. Last week we met Clayton Rosales, and he's a pretty cool guy. He does independent bar contracting, or I guess independent bartending, where he like bartends private events and stuff like that and he does that to like pay his way through college and just pays to live. So it's pretty sick, pretty sick. We talked to him about that. But today, if you haven't already checked out last week's episode, go check it out. But today we're having Kelleah Meuth on. Okay, she's someone who I've wanted to bring on the podcast for a while. Her personality is just screams entrepreneurship. She's done a baking business. She's looking to do real estate investing and has all these crazy plans that aren't really connected, but I guess I'm sure they are somehow. But please welcome Kelleah Meuth.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, happy to have you. Welcome. So, give the people, your story. Like, start from like how you got into baking, or how you got into entrepreneurship.
Okay, so both of my parents are small business owners where I grew up in Buda, Texas, and I was always raised to think outside of the box. I was homeschooled, so I got to really explore a bunch of interests and at a depth that a lot of people didn't have the opportunity to. And business was always something that I knew I wanted to do. So my first official one was when I was about 10. For 2 years, I baked healthy baked goods for the farmers markets, and I sold them every weekend at the farmers. Well, every single weekend. That was a great starter business. I learned about how budgeting worked, how to pay for my own expenses, just really understood the baseline concepts. And through that and a bunch of other side hustles throughout high school, I was able to create some pretty good savings. I always wanted to do something bigger. So currently, I am working on some projects where I'm using those savings to try to expand them and gain both experience, education, and be able to move on to larger projects. And we can definitely get more into that as the podcast goes on.
Yeah. Just starting. What was your baseline business? Was baking, right?
Yes, that was my first one and probably
Okay.
the most consistent.
How did you get into that?
I've always loved baking. My dad works in natural health, so I grew up very healthy, always knew about ingredients, always read labels, and I found out that a lot of what I really wanted to eat wasn't good for me, wasn't good to be putting into my body. So when I was 10 or 11, I got really into sourdough and learned about all the benefits of that. I actually taught a couple of workshops on it and started creating sourdough products for the farmers market. But I also worked with alternative sweeteners like coconut palm sugar and honey. I found that this was a niche that not a lot of people had filled. There were a lot of baked goods out there, but none of them are tasty and healthy, at least where I was selling. So it was something that I decided to pursue at that point.
Is sourdough really healthy?
Yeah, sourdough is a really healthy way to eat bread. Actually, a lot of people who are gluten intolerant can handle sourdough because basically what happens is the yeast and the bacteria, they're wild, they take long to ferment, and they produce lactic acid, which pretty much helps you pre-digest all of the nutrients in the flour and also the barriers to digestion that cause issues. So instead of just eating white flour and instantly getting a sugar high, you are getting a lot more nutrition out of it.
Wow. Well, that's one way to sell sourdough. Okay. So what made you transition from your baking business into what you pursued after that? And that was real estate, right?
Well, sort of. So I did the baking business for a couple of years and it was great, but I had a major issue, which was that all of my products that I worked so hard to make would go bad the next day. Like you wouldn't want to eat them.
Inventory.
They'd go stale. So I was spending money on all these ingredients and I was putting a lot of time into making them. And I really wanted to move on to a product that wouldn't disappear the next day if I couldn't sell it all. So from there, in high school, I actually moved on to a jewelry business.
Oh,
I
interesting.
started that because I was trying to raise money for a trip I was going on through school. And I ended up getting my jewelry placed in 2 boutiques and did that for several years. I actually still have my jewelry in a couple of stores. That's a
Don't tell me
little,
it hasn't sold.
huh?
Oh, no.
No, I replenish it.
Oh, okay. Oh,
um,
so you still do
I'm
this?
still doing this.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
sick.
it's again, it's more of a side hustle because it's the kind of jewelry I make isn't something that can be mass produced. It's
Mhm.
handcrafted. I really enjoy making it. It's not something that I can scale to the level of being, incredibly profitable. But it's something I enjoy doing and have continued over probably the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, it's a cool hobby you can make a little money off.
Yeah, exactly. So after that, I started college actually. I kind of put that stuff on the back burner because I did a gap year and traveled and then went to Arkansas for freshman year.
Mhm.
And I was trying to figure out how I could get started in an entrepreneurial sense. And I was reading a lot of books about real estate and trying to understand that industry. Read so many books, watched so many videos, listened to so many podcasts. And I got to a point where I knew a lot of terms and concepts, but not how to actually put it into action.
Yeah.
That's the difficult part. So I knew I wanted to be based in Central Texas in the end and really wanted to pursue real estate. And I also realized that getting started earlier is going to be extremely helpful in the long run. So I decided to transfer and I moved to Central Texas and started going to Texas State so that I could, while in college, work on building a network and building skills and diving into this investment world to have a better head start when I graduate.
Wow. Cool. How'd you? What part of the real estate process are you at right now?
So right now I'm at the stage of putting in offers. For the past probably 8 months, I've been gaining knowledge, finding
Mm-hmm.
mentors, and working with people to figure out like what makes a good deal. Where do you find deals? Who do you need to talk to, and what's the process? And even getting financing. Like you say it's a great idea to buy a house, but if you're buying $100,000 house that needs work, how do you fund that? So
Right.
understanding that, I mean, there are so many properties that come through on the MLS that you can see on Zillow, but figuring out if they're valued appropriately, what they could be worth, finding the right deal, and also figuring out how the negotiation process works with that, who to talk to, how to contact agents, where there's wiggle room and where there's not. That's a big learning curve. So that has been a big part of my journey since I moved here. Now that I know how to analyze deals and have done thousands of them, I'm at the point where I'm actually putting in offers and just right now putting in a bunch of offers and hopefully one of them will get accepted soon. My first project is going to be a fix and flip, so I'm looking at something I can add value to by fixing it up and making it look nice and then be able to sell it for a profit.
Cool. What do you think is like sort of the most useful thing or just the most interesting thing that you've learned that a lot of people don't know about when they first start or when they first think real estate or getting into real estate?
Yeah. Okay. The most interesting thing that I've come to realize is that real estate is an ecosystem. When I was a
Mm.
kid, I was so into biology, and I would go to the pond and I'd take a little sample and put it under my microscope, and I would research the ways that the aquatic plants produced oxygen and that fed the snails. The snails ate them. The snail poop went on to feed the plants. Like there's so much that goes on, and it's all circular.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started getting into real estate, I found a very similar structure, and that surprised me. You have people who live in the houses, families, and they wear them out, and eventually they're not in great condition. And then you have wholesalers who come and they door knock and they cold call and they try to buy these houses that need a lot of work. And then the wholesalers resell them to investors. The investors put in all of this work, They employ people, they employ contractors, they provide jobs. And by the end of the investment cycle, the house has been flipped and it becomes either a nice new house or a rental. So it is really amazing to see how neighborhoods and communities are getting revitalized through this process. And it really, really mirrors the natural cycles of the earth and the environment.
Interesting. I've never thought of real estate like that. It's pretty cool. Uh, what about like the more technical stuff? Like, were you shocked or lost when you got into the world of mortgages? Like, I don't know. Having to take out a mortgage seems pretty scary to me,
Yeah,
especially when it's
yeah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and you have no revenue yet, and you're like, hopefully this revenue pans out.
It's definitely scary. First started going to real estate investor meetups when I moved here and
Mm-hmm.
had absolutely no experience. I'd only read books, and I was sitting at tables with experienced investors who had been in the business for years. And I would ask them how to get started or how to find a property. And they'd been doing it for so long that it just seemed obvious and second nature. Like you just find one. Like you just get lending. You just get an
Mm-hmm.
you get an investor. It was not that obvious. It took me a long time to figure that out. So I first started by learning about mortgages. I used several agents that I was connected to get in touch with mortgage brokers. I was very surprised because a lot of mortgage brokers really didn't know what they were talking about. Like, I would ask
Mm.
them a simple question like, can I get a cosigner on a FHA loan? There was one woman I talked to, I asked her that question, and it took her a week to figure out the answer. Um,
Wow.
so I learned that even the people who seem like they're professionals and who have been doing it for a long time, a lot of times don't think outside of the box or think strategically. And so it takes a lot of your own knowledge to be able to make up for that because you have to know if the person you're working with and getting advice from and relying on is credible or if they are just acting like they know what they're doing. I've
Mm.
run into agents like this too. I was putting in an offer on a house a couple months ago, and the agent was mixing up a subject to, which is where you take over, well, you basically keep the mortgage in their name and take over payments, versus a loan assumption, where you're taking over the mortgage at their rates, versus an owner finance, which is where they're basically the lender selling it to you. So she was using all these three terms interchangeably. And if I didn't know what I was talking about, if I hadn't done my own research, um, I would have gotten into a really bad situation.
Oh
So,
wow.
so that being said, yes, finding lending is tricky. It takes talking to a lot of people, and doing your own research, and really just finding enough sources so that you can fact check even your mentors.
Interesting. What do you think if you could go back and give yourself some advice on how to sort of navigate this process, like the learning curve? I mean, what would you tell yourself?
Probably what I'm still telling myself. It takes a lot of upfront work to do this. It
Mm-hmm.
takes a lot of skill building and knowledge building, and most of the time, you also have to work really hard to save up money to even get started.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, it can feel like you're walking on a treadmill. Like you're putting in all this effort and all this time, and not really seeing the results. In school we have it pretty good because we put in effort and then 2 weeks later we have a test and we see if our effort has brought us somewhere or not.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end we know that in 4 years we're going to get a degree, a piece of paper that tells us we did a good job and we accomplished it. But in entrepreneurship and in real estate, that's often not the case, and it can take a long time before you see the fruits of your labor. So that's something that I'm still dealing with right now. I'm staying persistent. I'm consistently putting in offers, and I know it's going to pay off probably pretty soon, but still waiting on that.
Yeah. Has it ever been frustrating, or like have you ever seen deals that you couldn't act on because either the mortgage is too much, or like the deal just fell through for some reason, for one reason or another?
Yeah. Yeah. That's hard. I've had several deals that were great that I simply could not afford at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are rental properties that I see are in a great area that is going to boom, but I don't have the extra money to just sink it into a rental property as a down payment for a 30-year mortgage because I need to be leveraging that for something
Mm,
that'll generate more in the short term. So, long-term strategy is tough when you're still building capital and still
right.
building your base. Like what I'm looking at right now is a lot more short-term higher risk things to generate revenue. I'm excited for the day when I can just sink money into something and leave it there for 30 years. There are also deals that I've been really excited about that have fallen through because of other people, mostly agents that I've had to rely on. There was a deal recently that I was I put in an offer on, and it was a bidding war, and my agent was just an hour or two slow putting in my counter offer and lost the deal. Or the one I mentioned previously, where it was a great deal, but the agent couldn't tell the difference between three types of financing
Mm-hmm.
and acted like she knew what she was doing when she did not, which made me I ended up having to walk away from that because that wasn't a person that I felt like I could work with clarity and transparency. So yes, there have been plenty of times where that's happened, or when relying on other people, which you have to do in business, is an issue. But I am excited to start building a team that I can really trust and know will show up for me every time and be able to admit when they don't know something, because that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about sort of, the murky waters that people don't see in real estate. What are some of the things that like drew you in that made you think like, wow, real estate, that's pretty sick, pretty cool.
That's a good question. I have always known I wanted to start a business,
Mm-hmm.
and the problem is a lot of these business ideas are untested. Like, I am an action person. I'm really good at taking an idea, a really complicated idea, and just making it happen. I'm super persistent, but I'm not the idea generator. I've learned that about myself. So, I'm not going to be the person to come up with an idea for a brand new startup product that's never been invented. I'm probably going to be the person who takes that idea and,
Mm-hmm.
figures out the processes. So, what draws me to real estate is that it's been done over and over. It's your own business and it's entrepreneurial, but there you can look to other people who are a couple steps ahead of you, and you see where they succeeded and where they failed, and can learn from that before you even make those mistakes. And that's not something that's quite as easy when you are in uncharted waters.
Yeah. One final question for you. What advice would you give to someone who's trying to look at or trying to get into the real estate industry?
Well, I mean, I'm still one of those people.
Yeah,
um,
that's true.
I have put myself in a lot of situations that I'm not qualified to be in, and just tried to be as comfortable as I can in them. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a big thing, because in order to gain this kind of knowledge, you have to talk to a lot of people. It's not something that you can easily take a course on. It's something you learn by doing or watching other people do. And so that means having to go to events where they're all investors and you're not. Or, I mean, and a lot of these events. It means asking people to give you advice or to meet you for coffee, because that's really the only way to learn. Investors are busy people, and the best way to get into it is by assembling little bits of everyone's knowledge, because you're not going to get one person's sole focus. But I will also mention that while it is taking a while to get into real estate, I'm still putting in offers. I found a way to kind of kickstart that and get experience with my current project, which is flipping a camper trailer. So that's experience in renovation. I had to do analysis, comparables, very similar process from the ground up. It's something that's a little lower risk and I can get into it more easily. So I'm doing those at the same time. So I'm still working on putting in offers, but I'm also right now building these skills as I wait.
Interesting. Okay. Have you ever, so going back to what you said with meeting a lot of people who are investors and, you're not at that same echelon of investor yet, do they ever like discredit you or do you ever feel like you don't belong in this room with these other people?
Yes. Yeah, all the time. It is really hard to be respected in any industry without experience.
Mm-hmm.
But in investing, you kind of need to be experienced to be given the right deals or the right knowledge. Like for them to want to spend time with you, to see you as valuable enough to have around, like you need to show them value. It's kind of a circular problem.
Right.
But showing up consistently means a lot because I've noticed that even though I don't have experience that I can give to them in exchange, them seeing me there every week consistently, that shows them I'm dedicated. And after a while, it usually pays off in a sense, at least with certain people.
Interesting. All right. Consistency.
Yep.
Yeah. Important thing. All right. Speaking of consistency, first off, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate you taking the time to, come on and share your experience. But speaking of consistency, you guys should show up for the Bobcat Bazaar tomorrow. That's a consistent thing. Happens every other Thursday. Student businesses come out. They sell stuff. Kelleah, I think you did a baking one, right?
Yes. Yeah, we didn't really get to that, but I did that once for my baking business.
Yeah. So if you're a student entrepreneur, it's a great opportunity. You can come out, sell some stuff to other students. And if you're just a student, show up for your fellow Bobcat entrepreneurs. It's a pretty good time. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. Take care.